Well, let's go to LA for a hot minute then. I know y'all have been sharing this video for a little bit now, but I wanted to check it out here real quick. So an LA cop beats a peaceful protester with a shield and then stomps on his glasses. So here that is happening.
I could tell by his ankles the way he examined the doctor.
So is that the guy they stomped on his glasses?
Yeah, his name is Andy. He's an activist. Andy Activist is his Instagram. If people want to follow him, he's just a really great kid. But I say kid because I'm so old now. But Andy, I still can't believe that I watched that happen. Honestly, Ron, if you slow down the video, you can really see it. He's literally taking the shield, and it's almost like he's trying to knock his leg off with it. Like just.
So where should I go, backwards or forwards?
Backwards.
Backwards. Okay. So like right about here?
Yeah.
All right. Let's play from there.
Right about there.
Oh, now it's not loading. That's
annoying.
No. Come on. Really?
Bad internet.
Here, let me.
It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal, though. It's one of the more brutal police beatings I've seen recently.
So what happened to you recently at some of these protests?
Well, because I was filming that, I was lucky enough to have my protection on, so I had my Kevlar vest on, etc. And I saw them starting to do what they're doing, so I ran in there with my camera, and I didn't have my iPhone, I had my actual camera with me with a light pack, so they knew I was a journalist. Next thing I know, they started spraying me because I was shooting this stuff. And they
this was when they were beating the activist down. They were stomping on his glasses. You're filming it, and again, we have the here. Let me see if it maybe got better here. For some reason, it like just froze up on me all of a sudden. Still is. All right, that's weird. All right, but anyway, there's some of the footage. You guys can see the still at least. And so you're filming that, and then they attack you.
Yeah, they just, I don't know if it was just pepper balls or something bigger. You saw some of the welts. They're big.
Well, yeah, she is bruised everywhere. And I definitely think, like, especially there's one on her thigh that's just huge. I think it must have been, a rubber bullet or something. Because pepper ball, it was way too big to be just a pepper ball. Not just a pepper ball. Those hurt like hell. But it looks large.
But I was like, when I was filming that, I was like, I'm filming this. People have to see this. This is, I mean, they're brutalizing this kid. This is unbelievable.
And what did they do?
Huh?
What did they do? What did the cops just kept pummeling you, basically?
Well, because it didn't work. I think they thought if they did that, I'd stop filming and run away, which I absolutely did not do because I'm crazy, apparently.
Badass journalist.
I just stood there and grimaced a little bit. But, here's the thing. My injuries are nothing compared to what they did to these guys. And another one was beat across his face. He had a huge swollen black eye. There was no reason for this. And I spoke with them the next day, and I think this is really important too. When they asked him to get out of the car, the protesters complied, and they put guns into the truck windows when they asked him to get out. So they were already coming from a place of violence right off the get-go, right? Which I unfortunately did not get. I was too far away to get that part on video. But the minute they pulled him out is when all this hell broke loose. Instead of just like cuffing them and putting them in the car, they just got violent.
Well, what was he doing in the first place? Like, what was he doing in the car in the first place? Like, what was going on?
Okay, so the protest was basically because of what happened the night before. I don't know if folks know this. I should mention this. Somebody was ran over intentionally. A BLM protest was ran over intentionally by somebody. And the police let this guy go. I have no idea why they would let this guy go. It's clearly attempted murder. But so now the new thing was they had a plan to have cars protect the protesters. So there were front cars and then there was back cars, so people couldn't come up from behind. And this is how violent they are. The police say this stuff is such bullshit. This is looting, right? They had what they call this a sound truck where they have music playing. So literally, you have protesters marching through Santa Monica or down Santa Monica Boulevard through West Hollywood and then up into LA. But just with playing music and dancing and chanting, like there was nothing. There was no reason.
How it's been. I mean, that's how it's been in Beverly Hills. That's how it's been in Pasadena, where I live. I mean, that's how it's kind of been everywhere for a little while now for that reason, like you mentioned.
Yeah. And so what angers me is the new thing the sheriff's department seems to be doing is just calling an unlawful assembly at the drop of a hat. Okay, disperse. This is an unlawful assembly, even though they're not doing anything other than exercising their First Amendment rights. So they had done that. but when the sheriff's department gave the dispersal order, he specifically said it at Santa Monica. I can't remember what street. I was right in front of the sheriff's department there. And so the protesters were there for a minute, but then they're like, yes, let's move on. We don't want to get arrested, right? So then they marched up to Sunset Boulevard. So they actually had complied with that because they specifically said that location when they gave the unlawful assembly order. So there was no reason for this. And it was probably one of the worst beatings I've seen yet. Like, I'm still like shocked.
So they just pulled.
It looked like they were trying to sever his leg or break his ankle. I just remember standing there watching this going, Jesus, what am I watching right now?
I mean, so bringing it back to you, when did they just stop firing at you?
I actually don't know. It was so like,
I understand. Of course.
And
yeah,
then at some point they
understandable.
let some tear gas out, and I could only take so much of that tear gas with I had a respirator, but not on me. I had left it in the car. I was stupid. So I just had my regular mask on. So I stayed as long as I could, but then the tear gas started to really get to me. So then I backed off, but I kept filming from farther. I just zoomed in a little bit more. But you can't tell me that they didn't do it on purpose. It just.
Oh, of course they did. They are brutalized, and this isn't the first time. I mean, you've been shot at before.
Yeah. Josie from KPCC, I mean, the one thing
right?
a couple weeks ago was totally unacceptable.
What was that?
So they threw her on the ground and cuffed her, and then they were claiming after, and they arrested her. She was in jail overnight, and then they claimed that she didn't have her press credentials on, where you can clearly see her credentials in the video. I even did a screenshot of it. They were clear, right as day.
And they shot out the windows to the Bernie van with Convo Cow.
Yeah, that's right.
They shot at you. They busted your windshield out. Then they shot at you again for filming them beating the shit out of somebody else. I mean, this is absolutely. And then they see a guy with a gun walking around. They do absolutely nothing.
Yeah,
or they see a guy, see a guy with a big gun who ended up shooting a couple people, and they waved to him. He's a quote friendly
in Kenosha. Yeah, I'm just speechless by this. Yeah, and honestly, the California thing, because we have very strict gun laws here in California, and I guess we should explain that for folks that don't live in California. You can't go around brandishing a handgun in California. You just can't. So, and I believe this guy was associated with the Trump Unity Bridge. He'd been standing on the Trump Unity Bridge all day. He had been there with the guy that owns it earlier, and I think they're from Michigan or someplace originally. I'm not sure, but I doubt this guy was from California. He might have been. We haven't been able to identify who he is at this point, but that is a felony offense. And I asked Alex Salazar, who was the LAPD whistleblower that I interviewed a couple weeks ago that left the LAPD and is now whistleblowing. I said, what would you have done in that situation? And he said, are you kidding me? I would tackle the guy and take his gun away. And I'm like, he said, were there cops there? I said, yeah, there were 100 cops there, dude. 100 cops. And nobody's doing anything. Then they started firing non-lethal rounds at the BLM side. I was just like, wow, this is crazy.
It's unbelievable. Well, thank you all for being on the front lines and for bringing these stories to the surface, because nobody else is. Well, other people, but you know what I mean. If it wasn't for independent media.
They're not covering it. And when they do, they don't actually, what frustrates me, Ron, is when they do, they don't tell precisely the correct story.
Right.
Like I had a gentleman from CNN in my mentions or in my DMs on Twitter last 2 or 3 days ago. He wanted to license this footage. And I explained to him what had happened, right? Mm-hmm. And I was just, at the end of the day, said no.
They were offering
next to nothing. And then I'm not even sure that they would have told the accurate story. I mean,
I don't blame you.
Please subscribe to Status Quo and Ron Show and my podcast, District 34, because this is the only places we have to do our own distribution, because the mainstream media doesn't want to cover these stories. And this is what.
Or if they do, they cover it. They cover it from a distance, and they cover it cop side first. The propaganda is seen as fact first. That's what exactly they do. What so yeah. I don't blame you. I don't blame you for saying, you know what? I don't want you to use this footage because I have a feeling you're going to lie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I really feel strongly at this point, like Alex Villanueva, I think, was our last chance at reform. He came, and for people to know, he is the LA County Sheriff currently. He's the first Democratic sheriff we've had in Los Angeles in 100 years, right? And he ran as like a Bernie crowd. If people don't remember this was, 2015, 2016. He was coming in saying, I'm going to abolish ICE from the prison system, which he did, but he replaced him with a corporate entity that's basically doing the same thing as ISIS. So I'm not sure how that's an improvement at all. But his big thing was like, he acknowledged that there was white supremacy gangs inside the sheriff's department, that, you know, like Paul Tanaka and the Linwood Vikings, that had been a problem. So he was very honest and upfront about these issues, and he was going to fix them, reform them. But now when you hear him talk at press conferences, he says the opposite. He's, you know, I went to one a couple of weeks ago, and he was basically saying, this is Los Angeles. It's not the South. We don't have white supremacist gangs in the sheriff's department. And I'm like, wow, like, where is the guy that was going to reform this? Yeah. So I feel very strongly, and I know some people are going to find this to be controversial, but I don't think you can reform the sheriff's department. I think they just need to be blown up. Just end it here.
Oh, you're on the right.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Not literally.
Not literally. No. Yeah. Metaphorically.
For the CIA was watching.
Right. Metaphorically. Well, I'm with you. I mean, the ship for reform has sailed. It is way too little, way too late. We need to completely. I mean, the way I describe it, it's like you need to demilitarize, defund, and then just reimagine law enforcement in our lives. We can't have it the way it currently exists. It's just too far gone.
Too far gone. Yeah. I mean, they do think it's like being occupied by military force in our own neighborhoods at this point.
That's exactly what it is.
And they have these ridiculous assault vehicles that they drive around on. That they're, you know, these trucks where they all hold on to the sides and then they jump off in their riot gear. I mean, you see this and you're like, wow, they look like an occupying force. They don't even look like law enforcement. They look like an occupied military force at this point. It's insane.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your